Hello and welcome back to this episode of the Balls Up podcast, or the podcast where we talk about the latest in sport, and of course we have the Balls Up section. I'm Courtney English.
And I'm your host, Daniel Hayton. So first up, we're going to talk about the Snooker World Championships. We are into the quarterfinals at the moment, and we have Judd Trump, the defending world champion from last year. He is behind 10-6 to Kyron Wilson. We have Mark Selby up 12-6 against Neil Robertson in a good match in which Selby actually went 5-0 up and Robertson fought back a bit, but Selby's pulled out another lead. We've got Kurt Mafflin behind 3-7 to Anthony McGill in the only non-seeded players left in the tournament. They're both against each other looking for a semi-final place. And the big match of the quarterfinals is Mark Williams, world champion of a couple of years ago, versus the five-time world champion Ronnie O'Sullivan, in which Mark Williams leads 6-2.
Sounds pretty close.
Yeah, there's some really good action too. Of course, you would expect that from a world championship, biggest tournament of the calendar. But yeah, it's living up to it. Okay, now we're going to move on to the NFL. And there's not been too much news as we're coming up to the training camps, which I believe have started already, but we're having no pre-season games as they were cancelled. And a couple of players have opted out of the new season, obviously due to the problems with COVID and everything. For the New York Giants, Solder has opted out, and Kansas City's Duvernay Tardif has opted to not play. We've got the college football season has been cancelled. Athletes and fans are doing everything they can to try and get it back, but it's not looking like it's going to happen. And even NBA legend Shaquille O'Neal actually has his Twitter bio, "I stand with the student athletes, #we want to play." So people are trying to get it back, but yeah, I'm not sure if it's going to actually happen or not.
It would be nice to see it come back.
Definitely.
If you go to college to play football, how many years are they at college in America?
Well, it depends when they go for the draft, but it can be anywhere up to 4.
So if you take a year out of that, it's...
Oh yeah, a year out would be a crazy loss.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it would mean for the draft or
that's a good
anything. So,
yeah.
They really do need it to happen.
Yeah, definitely.
Moving on to the NBA, in which the action is actually almost finished from the restart. We're almost ready to go on to the playoffs. We've had 6 or 7 out of the 8 games. A few teams have played 7 games, a few teams have played 6. But in the East, everything's already wrapped up as the Wizards didn't get off to the start they needed, and they actually haven't won a game since returning. So all the East playoff teams are decided, as the Wizards were the only team coming back who are actually in playoff contention. It's all to play for in the West though, as it's really coming down to the wire. The Suns are undefeated since coming back, and they've really pulled the gap closer. The Grizzlies are still holding on to the 8th seed. They're half a game up on the Blazers, who are still playing well. They had a big win over the 76ers the other day. They won by 3 points, but Damian Lillard, their team leader, had 51 points, and Gary Trent Jr. of the Blazers has made the most 3-pointers since the restart, which is kind of unexpected, but he's been absolutely going crazy. And another quite unexpected performance from TJ Warren for the Pacers. He scored 53 points in his first game, and since then he scored 34 points, 32. He had an off game with 16, which still really isn't that of an off game, and 39 points. So
he's on it.
Really pulling the Pacers up there. The Lakers have clinched the best record in the West, and the Bucks have the best record in the East, so that's going to be a hot matchup. Though I think the Clippers are probably the best team in the West, as the Lakers they're really top heavy with LeBron and Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
But I think the Clippers are definitely more well-rounded, and that'll be a definite interesting matchup. And in the East, we've probably got the best team in the NBA in the Bucks, so they just need to get it done in the playoffs and they'll be a big threat. We had a really crazy game between the Rockets and the Mavericks in which there was 160 points scored in one half.
In one half.
This is the highest scoring first half over the last 20 NBA seasons.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
At the half, it was 75 to the Rockets and 85 to the Mavericks. I mean, this just sums up the Rockets, really. They can absolutely score with the best of them, but ask them to defend and they're just nope. They don't want to do it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, they have James Harden and Russell Westbrook, who are two of the best scoring guards in the NBA, but they just seem to take time off on defense, and it really shows. Like, they can score with the best of them, but as a team, I don't really think they're going to go that far.
Yeah.
But they're fun to watch, so I guess they've got that going for them. Devin Booker has been playing really well for the Suns and is a big reason why they are 6-0. He had a pretty much half-court shot against the Thunder. And another player that is going well is Luka Doncic. He posted a career-high 19 assists as he registered his NBA-leading 17th triple-double. He is not very far into his NBA career at all. He's definitely looking like a very good player.
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
The 17th triple-double.
Well, a triple-double is like he had 36 points, 14 rebounds and 19 assists. They're all in double figures, and that's where the triple-double comes from.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and 17's a lot.
Yeah.
Because that's not an easy stat line to get a triple-double. Moving on to the MLB, and we're getting a little bit into the season. The Astros have lost 5 games in a row.
That's not good.
Including getting swept by the division-leading A's, who have won 9 straight. So it's looking like the Astros maybe not going to the playoffs.
That's funny.
Yeah, they've reached a couple of World Series in the last 3 years, and now they are really struggling. In the NL West, the Rockies are actually going toe-to-toe with the Dodgers, surprisingly, and the Rockies are actually looking like an all-round good team. They currently are leading the division half a game up on the Dodgers. Back to the AL, as the Yankees and Twins are doing about as good as expected leading their division. The Marlins are actually doing better than expected leading their division, in which the World Series champions from last year, Nationals, are actually 4-7, doing... they're quite disappointing since the restart. The Cubs are going well, topping their division. And onto the players that are actually doing well. We've got Fernando Tatis Jr. for the Padres hitting .333 with 8 home runs. And Aaron Judge is also up there with him, both leading the restart with home runs of 8. Batting average, we got Charlie Blackmon of the Rockies, so he's a big reason why they're doing well, and Solano of the Giants. They're both hitting above .455, which is an absolutely crazy average. I would expect that average to definitely go down, but that's a very hot start, and that's exactly what you need in a short season. You need a hot start, because if you have a slow start, there's not really a lot of games to get yourself going.
No, you need that momentum from the start.
Definitely. Judge, Blackmon and Tatis all leading up there in RBIs. On to pitchers, we've got Trevor Bauer, the only pitcher left under a 1 ERA, and considering we're 4 starts into the season, that is absolutely insane. And again, 4 starts into the season, D-backs newcomer Madison Bumgarner has a 9.35 ERA.
What?
And that is definitely not what you expect from a pitcher of his quality. And like I said, it's after 4 starts, so it's not just after 1 game where you've got like a 9 ERA, and this is easily leading, well, I guess not leading, it's complete dead bottom of ERA in terms of who actually qualifies. And that is an absolute struggle. Twins are doing well, even though their best pitcher, Barrios, is struggling with a 5+ ERA. Not as bad as Bumgarner, but still not great. And in terms of fielding, Rafael Devers of the Red Sox he still can't field. He leads the league in errors, which he's been up there for the last few years, and every year he's actually been in the majors. And that doesn't help their already awful pitching. I mean, the Red Sox have a good offense, and they have for the last couple of years, but it's been their pitching that struggled. I mean, their best pitcher, Nathan Eovaldi, has a +4 ERA, and that's just never going to get you wins.
No, that's not good enough.
And there's a reason they are not looking like making the playoffs, because no matter how many runs you score, if your pitchers are just going to give up more.
Yeah.
Some more bad news for the Red Sox is we talked about Eduardo Rodriguez having that heart condition due to COVID-19, and we thought he was only going to be out for a week. However, he has now been shut down for the season, which is a big blow to their pitching staff.
Definitely not what
He was easily their best pitcher last season, and now they've got to do the season without him. And another team that have got to do a season without one of their better pitchers is the New York Mets, as Marcus Stroman has elected not to play for the rest of the season due to COVID-19 concerns. He has been injured this season and hasn't pitched due to a left calf tear, but he is not going to play this season, and he can become a free agent after this season. Another bit of big news to talk about is Mookie Betts, who got traded from the Red Sox to the Dodgers, has actually signed a long-term contract with the Dodgers.
Really?
Which is actually kind of a surprise, because I expected him to maybe stay with the Dodgers for a year and then test out the free agent market, which he wanted to do with the Red Sox, and that's why the Red Sox traded him. But I expected him to play a year in LA, go to the free agent market, see what he can get, and then maybe come back to LA. But obviously he's quite happy making hundreds of millions of dollars and living in LA, which why wouldn't you be?
Yeah, I mean, that is the life.
Yeah, he's and he can relax for the rest of his career. I believe it's a 10-year contract. So
Whoa, that's a nice contract.
That's a healthy amount of his career, and he's getting paid for every single one of them years, big time. Which obviously he deserves. He's an MVP, one of the better players in the league, and he decided he wanted to do it in LA for the majority of his career. Right, now we are going on to football, and obviously the main season has finished, but football is not completely finished, as we still have the Champions League and the Europa League. We obviously had the FA Cup final as well, which Chelsea ended up losing to Arsenal 2-1. It was actually a really good start to the game for Chelsea, as in the first 5 minutes they went 1-0 up with Christian Pulisic, but they quickly gave away a penalty from some terrible defending by Azpilicueta, really. Aubameyang gets over behind him and he just pulls him down in the box, and it was a great finish from Aubameyang, and Aubameyang actually finished it off with the second goal as well. So will he stay at Arsenal? Because they really need him to, because he's easily their best player. The game was very controversial in a way. The refereeing was
not great.
It wasn't good, and I believe it took up till at least 50 minutes into the game before Chelsea actually won a free kick.
Yeah.
Kovacic got sent off for a tackle that was absolutely not a red card.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a yellow card. In fact, on the replay, it looked like he actually tapped the ball a little bit, and he actually got sent off for that. I mean, I know he got the yellow card, and then he committed a few fouls after that, but to send him off for what that tackle actually was absolutely ridiculous. And it just seemed like Chelsea were playing against 12 men the whole entire game.
Yeah.
But you can't take it away from Arsenal, because they definitely played well.
Yeah, they did play well.
They were the better team. I mean, Chelsea played well for 15 minutes of the 90, and that's not how you win games, let alone cup finals. So Arsenal 100% definitely deserved to win that game, and they were the better game. But we definitely need some new refs.
Oh, yeah, you could say that.
And I think that just explains VAR in itself, because these guys are the ones controlling VAR, and that is why it is not working. The Championship playoffs have been decided. It was Brentford and Fulham in the final at Wembley, and it was actually a crazy end to the game. It got all the way to extra time at 0-0, and all of a sudden, next time we just had 3 goals. Fulham went 2-0 up, and Brentford couldn't claw it back. They got a goal right at the end, but Fulham are joining Leeds and West Brom in the Premier League. So Fulham are straight back up which is obviously good for them. Back to the Championship. Sheffield Wednesday have been deducted 12 points for next season due to an independent disciplinary panel deciding that they broke spending rules.
Oh, what did they do?
Apparently, they breached rules by including the sale of their Hillsborough Stadium in their 2017-2018 accounts, despite it being sold a year later.
Oh.
So, yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah, definitely not. But one interesting thing to come out of this is that they've been deducted the 12 points onto next year. Whereas Wigan
Got it onto this year.
got deducted 12 points if they didn't get relegated automatically. So, and obviously Wigan, they lost their appeal against the 12-point deduction and have been confirmed into League One for next year, but Sheffield Wednesday get to wait till next year.
That's not really very fair.
In my opinion, Wigan have been completely screwed over.
Oh, yeah.
Their 12-point deduction should have been added on to next year.
Yeah.
There was no way that it should have been added on to this year. That's absolutely crazy.
Especially if Sheffield Wednesday has been...
I mean, it got decided when there was like 3 games left of the season. I mean, I get it if they decided it before the restart or even at the start of the season, but to decide that right at the end of the season and to add it on to this year...
It seems very unfair.
Yeah, it's definitely not good. We've also had some transfers for Premier League teams, as Brighton have signed Joel Veltman from Ajax for an undisclosed fee. They've also signed Adam Lallana from Liverpool for a free transfer. Hopefully Adam Lallana can actually get his career going again at Brighton. He's obviously going to get game time there, which he wasn't at Liverpool, and hopefully he can overcome his injury problems that have really hindered his career. Nathan Ake has moved from Bournemouth to Man City for £40 million.
I mean, this didn't surprise me.
I mean...
He's a good defender.
Definitely. I mean, he definitely shone in that poor Bournemouth defence, and Man City need defenders, and he's still young, still got loads of improvement, and he's a good on-ball defender, and he's quick, and he feels like a Man City player.
Yeah.
Talking of Bournemouth, Eddie Howe has left the club by mutual consent after 8 years in charge. So Bournemouth will be looking for a new manager, and we'll see what Eddie Howe decides to do with his next step of his career. He said he's taken a year off from football after that decision. But yeah, he's definitely a really good manager. I mean, he's taken Bournemouth up through the leagues in this 8 years, all the way to the Premier League, and they unfortunately couldn't get to stay up this year. I mean, they're going to be a big loss to the Premier League, because I think they showed it at the end of the season. They were a little bit too late, but they definitely showed that they were Premier League worthy, and it's unfortunate that they got relegated. Another Man City transfer is they've signed Valencia winger Ferran Torres for 23 million euros. He's a Spanish under-21 star, and one for the future, definitely. Inter Milan have completed the permanent deal for Manchester United forward Alexis Sanchez. He was on loan this year after not really doing a lot for Manchester United. He was not very good at all for them, but he's now been taken on a 3-year deal by the Italian team. Another more recent transfer is, I'm going to butcher this name because it's Greek, but it's Kostas. I'm not sure if the T is silent. It might be Tsimikas. I'm assuming the T might be silent there, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, he's a left-back from Olympiacos, going to provide cover for Andy Robertson. They've signed him for about £11.7 million, so not a bad feat at all. And it looks like Pierre-Emile Højbjerg is going to move from Southampton to Tottenham, and he is going to have a medical before that move. Moving back to the lower football leagues, clubs in League One and League Two have voted in favour of introducing a salary cap.
I like this idea because it's like, you see it with the Premier League, there's a clear divide of where the clubs have more money than others. So I think this is a good idea.
Yeah, it'll take immediate effect, and the limits have been set as 2.5 million for League One and 1.5 million for League Two, which is the maximum they can spend on their team. Wages, bonuses, taxes and image rights, plus agents and other relevant fees will be included within the cap.
Okay.
So yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. And League One, League Two, the gap between all the teams, it's kind of the same with the Championship. There's a very small gap between the teams, and this will keep that right there, and that'll be definitely very good for them leagues, because it'll keep everyone competitive, which is exactly what you want for lower leagues.
Yeah. Can you ever see something like that happen in the Premier League?
I very much doubt it.
No, I don't think
Very much doubt Man City are going to want to not be able to spend all the money that they do, and be limited with all the money that they actually have.
Definitely.
Some interesting news from the Professional Footballers Association, as they say that the plans for the salary cap in League One and League Two are unlawful and unenforceable. They have a problem with the EFL and the Football Associations not actually going to them to discuss it, I believe, and they don't like the deal, but I don't think there's anything they can do about it.
No.
Some more punishments have been dished out by UEFA, as Wolves have been punished for overspending. Now, this won't actually matter unless they win the Europa League this year, because they will only be allowed to register 23 players if they qualify for the Champions League next season. Obviously, they finished 7th in the Premier League, and Arsenal got the final Europa League spot, and if they win the Europa League, they will get into the Champions League, but if they don't win the Europa League, then this won't matter at all. But usually you're allowed to register 25 players. They've knocked it down to 23, and I believe they've had to say that they're going to end up turning a profit within the next couple of years.
Okay.
Well, they've had to promise UEFA that they're going to make this much money by this amount of time.
What is it they've actually done then?
Well, they've spent too much money, because financial fair play, you're not allowed to lose a certain amount of money over a 3-year period.
Okay.
And they've obviously gone over that limit. And yeah, they haven't been punished too harshly for it, because obviously it probably won't even matter unless Wolves win the Europa League, but they've got to turn a profit, and I don't think we'll be seeing them spend too much money over the next few years.
Oh no.
We've got some interesting management changes going on, as Juventus, who were knocked out of the Champions League by Lyon on away goals, surprisingly, have sacked their manager Maurizio Sarri and have gone for Italian football legend Andrea Pirlo and former Juventus player Andrea Pirlo as their new boss. It's come a week after hiring the former midfielder as their under-23s boss. So it's another one of these situations where we see teams going for former players as their former players at that for managers. Obviously we've seen that quite a bit in the Premier League, and we'll see how it goes, because obviously he hasn't managed a team at all. So to come to a top team like Juventus and be expected to win everything.
That's a lot of pressure.
I mean, he was hired as the under-23s boss, and now he's just been moved up to the first team, so, I mean, hopefully he does well. I just don't know how that one's going to go, but obviously we've seen Frank Lampard this year. He came from a Championship team to pull a Chelsea team which has not been able to spend any money and has lost their best player. They pulled him up into 4th without a defence and without a goalkeeper. So yeah, he had no Premier League experience before that, so it's definitely possible that he could do well, but I mean, Juventus is a different beast entirely, because they're expected to win everything. And that's why Sarri got sacked, because they didn't even make it to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Another appointment over in Spain, as Villarreal have appointed former Arsenal boss Unai Emery on a 3-year deal. So we'll see how he does there. Hopefully he does better than he did at Arsenal. But he's looking to pull Villarreal up from the mid-table back to where they used to be in the Europa League, and maybe even the Champions League beyond that.
Okay, we're going to go on to Speedway now, and we've got some news from different parts of the sport, actually. To start with, it has not been Niels Christian Iversen's season. He got injured right at the very start of the season and took a couple of weeks out. came back, had a rough start, but got back into it, and unfortunately he is injured again for his team Gorzhov. Apparently had fallen Heat 1 and hurt his wrist. He raced another 3 races, scoring 5+2, despite being in a lot of pain. And then apparently he went for x-rays and they've confirmed that he's got a broken bone in his hand. He's got surgery booked to screw it back together, and apparently the doctors are confident that he's going to be able to race again in a few weeks. So hopefully he can get it sorted, get back to racing, and hopefully not get any more injuries, especially because the Grand Prix are starting soon, which we're going to talk about now. The Grand Prix are finally, because a lot got cancelled, and I was beginning to think we're not going to get a Grand Prix season, and I wasn't really sure how it was going to happen. Like, I didn't want it to be like where they just had one meeting, and it's finally been sorted. So they have done a calendar for this season. A lot of the rounds are in Poland, but honestly I don't think anyone's complaining. Everyone are just happy to get some World Championship racing.
Well, it made sense for them to do it in Poland because obviously the Polish League has already started. They're racing in Poland, so why not do it in Poland?
Yeah, so round 1 is in Wrocław in Poland on the 28th of August. Round 2 is also in Wrocław on the 29th of August. Round 3 is in Gorzhov on the 11th of September. Round 4 is also in Gorzhov on the 12th of September. Then we go to Prague on the 18th of September for round 5. Round 6 is also in Prague on the 19th of September. And then for the final rounds we go back to Torun like normal, which takes place on the 2nd of October and the 3rd of October. So we have 8 rounds, which is pretty decent considering no one thought we were going to be having any.
Yeah, and they're doing them on back-to-back days.
Which would, I'm guessing this means that they're going to take out qualifying, which they brought in last year. Honestly, as long as we get Grand Prix racing, I'm happy. Now, the European Championship has come to a close and Robert Lambert has won it. The last meeting was very close actually. There was only a couple of points between Robert, who was leading the standings, and Leon Madsen, who was second. I think there was about 2 or 3 points in it at the start of the meeting, and by the end of the meeting they were all gaining points, they were all dropping points, so it was really close. So yeah, it was a very tight meeting, and they both riders got to the final of this meeting, so it was really close. And you know, Madsen can always bring it out the bag, you can never write him off, but Lambert went out, made a beautiful gate, and he just went and he won it, and you could tell he was so emotional in the interview. He looked really happy because he's finally got a permanent place in the Grand Prix for next year, which is well deserved. Last year in the Grand Prix he was kind of thrown in unexpectedly, and he did all right considering like how much racing he was doing, so it'd be really good to see him in it full time. Sticking with the European Championship, in that meeting there was a horrible crash. It was just one of those crashes that just doesn't look pretty at all. It involved David Bellego, and they just clipped tyres. It happens quite a lot, and it threw him both off the bike, but apparently he has got a broken collarbone and he's going to be out for about 2 months, but we'll see how his injury goes. Not the season he was hoping for.
Definitely not.
But hopefully he can get that sorted and get back to racing. So we've also been confirmed that there is going to be a Speedway of Nations, which I'm looking forward to, with Robert Lambert on the form that he is at the minute, and Woofenden starting to get back into his normal form. Hopefully Team GB can get a medal, because we need one. But it's set to return, and the final is going to be in Manchester, which is great, and it's going to be on October 24th to 25th. Which some people have said is maybe not the best idea because Manchester in October, it's bound to rain. So hopefully the weather stays nice, but we'll have to see. And it's going to feature Team GB, Russia, Poland, Australia and Denmark, and Czech Republic are completing the lineup after making their first appearance in the final because Germany withdrew. I'm not really sure why Germany withdrew. I don't know if it's because Smolinski's got his hip problems, but then he's starting to come back, so I don't really know why.
Maybe they just don't want to risk it.
Yeah, maybe, but it's going to be a cracking final. It's going to be great, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. Now onto the Extra League. We have had it's a bit of a mix-up, to be honest, because Gorzhov have not had the best of seasons. It's been pretty rough for them. They were down at the bottom of the table. World champion Bartosz Marzik led Gorzów to their first extra league win of 2020 with an 18-point maximum. I mean, this is definitely what they needed. They were not having a good season, and finally they've got a win. I think they've actually had 2 home wins now, so hopefully they can stay up and not get relegated. I think now they're off the relegation zone for the first time since the start of the season, so hopefully things are going to turn around for them. Now, this is something that I don't know if I like it or not. I think a lot of people do like it, but I'm undecided. The Grand Prix are changing their scoring system, so if you win it, you're now going to get like the most points. If you come second in the actual meeting, you'll get the next amount of points, and so on. Instead of being like normal where you get points for how many race wins you get, and so instead of winning the race you get 3 points, you get 2 points coming second, you know what I mean. Yeah, I'm not sure how I really feel about it. I mean, I guess we'll see how it works when it gets going, but
I think it sounds better, because obviously the more meetings you win, the more points you're going to get, rather than if you just like win a few finals and that's about it.
Yeah.
You do all right in the others. The better riders are gonna win the world championship.
I guess it's going to keep it more consistent, like those riders because you get riders who always like win one round and then don't really do anything the rest of the round. So I guess it will be better for the riders that are more consistent.
I'm not really 100% sure if it'll change much though, because obviously the best riders win anyway.
Yeah, that's true, but then you do get odd ones, like where...
You get odd Grand Prix, and you'll still get that, because
true.
you saw Kolodze, I believe, won one last year, and there was
Yeah.
nowhere for the rest of the season, but you'll still get that. But I don't really think it changes anything with the order of points scored, because the best riders win anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. So that is it for Speedway.
Yeah, now we're going to move on to F1. We're coming off the back of 2 British Grand Prix at Silverstone. But before we talk about them, we're going to talk about the big news in the sport currently. And that is Sergio Perez has tested positive for COVID-19. He's missed both of the weekends in the UK. I believe he's going to be back for Spain, but not 100% sure. And Hülkenberg returned to F1 to replace him, and he's had a very up and down start, considering. I mean, in the first Grand Prix, it was the first time he's been in that car. You couldn't expect too much from him, but he did all right. But unfortunately, they couldn't even get that car out of the garage because it wouldn't start.
Yeah, it wasn't the best start for him.
But then he comes back in the second Grand Prix weekend and he gets third in qualifying, absolutely crazy. But then, unfortunately, in the race, he only ends up coming 7th. And obviously, Hülkenberg, he's had the most Grand Prix starts without a podium of any F1 driver ever.
That's not a nice stat.
And yeah, he couldn't convert that third place into a podium. And I mean, you don't expect him to, because he's been in the sport 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I mean, the Racing Point car's good, but they haven't really had like the consistency to be up all the way there. Obviously, they've had a really good car. Whether they've actually done that fairly is another thing to talk about in a bit.
Yep.
George Russell's still looking good for Williams, as he's made it into Q2 for both of the weekends. Unfortunately, Latifi hasn't been able to follow him. He spun in the first qualifying session, unfortunately. Williams have come so far because last year they were 1 second slower than any other car in Q1 of the 2019 British Grand Prix, and now they're making it through to Q2.
Yeah.
And Alfa Romeo are really struggling. It's a weird one, because I was thinking after qualifying, Alfa Romeo have replaced Williams now as the worst team, but Williams just can't do anything in the race. They have decent pace for qualifying, but then they always come last in the race.
I find that really weird. Like, I don't understand how that happens, because if you do all right in qualifying, you're going to do at least all right in the race.
They've obviously got that 1 lap pace, but
Yeah.
over the race they've still got a lot of work to do. And as far as they've come, there's still a long way to go, unfortunately.
Hopefully in a couple of years, though, they'll be back in the mix.
Yeah. Hamilton obviously won the first Grand Prix. He had a little bit of a struggle in qualifying as he tried to qualify on the mediums in Q2, and on his first run he actually spun, and he actually brought out a red flag for the session due to putting gravel over the track. And Bottas was actually a second clear of anyone after the first run in Q2. Albon went out in Q2. This is a thing with the Red Bull car. Obviously Verstappen's great and the Red Bull car isn't bad on its own, but Albon is really struggling. We saw this last year with Gasly, who's doing absolutely great in the AlphaTauri now. I just think that the Red Bull car is set up way too much to Verstappen's crazy driving style, and any other driver that sits in that second car is just really struggling to get used to it.
It's a shame, really, but...
Because obviously Verstappen's a great driver, but I just think the car's too much set up to him.
Yeah.
But when he produces like he does, how can you not? But
yeah,
it's not really fair on the second driver because Gasly's outperforming Albon in the sister team car.
Yeah.
And that shouldn't really be happening at all. And it's not Albon being a bad driver, because obviously he's absolutely doing amazing in the race, because he's saving these poor qualifying results by getting up there in the race.
Yeah, I mean, you can see there's a lot of potential there for him.
Yeah, so I just think the car's too set up to Verstappen's crazy driving style, and any other driver that sits in that second car is just going to struggle a lot to get used to it, and Albon still hasn't got used to it. Mercedes obviously in another world in qualifying. Vettel has only started above 10th once this year in the Ferrari. Leclerc is actually pulling that car up to like 4th, but Vettel just has absolutely no pace.
It's not looking good for him at all.
It's not looking good for Ferrari. I mean, it just shows how good of a driver Leclerc is, because he's pulling that awful car all the way up to almost podiums. The first race, the first British Grand Prix of this season was absolutely insane. I mean, for the first 90% of the race, it was dull. You know, it was just a normal F1 race. Mercedes out in front, a few mid-table team scraps, but just all of a sudden, the last 10 laps, the race just went crazy. And we've seen this a lot, last lap craziness in the new season. The tyres, what a mess. Hamilton was so lucky to get a win. He actually crossed the line on 3 tyres.
I was literally screaming at the TV, go, go, go!
Verstappen, I mean, Bottas got the puncture first.
Yeah.
And he ended up not even being in the points, which was massive for the championship.
Oh, yeah.
But Verstappen, as soon as Bottas got a puncture, Verstappen pitted, like obviously reacting to Bottas, because he came in on for the soft tyres, and obviously it was a bit covering off Bottas and a bit obviously wanting to save the tyres, because you don't want the same thing to happen to you.
Exactly.
He really shouldn't have pitted, because after he pits, Hamilton then gets the puncture. If he had stayed out, he would have won the race.
Yeah.
Like, obviously his tyres may have gone off, but we don't know. And if they hadn't have pit, they probably would have got the win, because Verstappen finished something like 6 seconds behind Hamilton.
Oh, he was so close.
And that gap was about 30 seconds until the last lap.
Yeah.
And then he finished 6 seconds behind. He would have easily won that. Hamilton was crawling around on 3 tyres. Hamilton did an amazing job to actually get that car around the track.
Oh, yeah, because his tyre was an absolute mess.
Yeah, the front left tyres. I mean, even Sainz had a puncture too, which was very bad for McLaren. Stroll struggled for pace in the racing point. Again, they're struggling with a bit of consistency. Vettel had no pace. Overtaking wasn't easy at this track, but people just couldn't push the tyres because they just went straight off a cliff.
Yeah.
Albon, as we talked about earlier, was saved this race. There was a lucky podium for Leclerc because obviously Bottas went down the order. But it was a big championship swing as Hamilton went 30 points ahead of Bottas.
Yeah, that's quite a bit, especially because it's not as many races.
And this kind of race is really good for F1 because obviously Mercedes are way out in front, and that's a little bit dull because who can really challenge them, apart from maybe Verstappen on the odd occasion. But exciting ends to like this and good midfield scraps are really good for the sport to keep it exciting and interesting, even if the top fight is a bit dull. And hopefully Bottas and Hamilton can have a good fight at the top to make that a bit interesting as well, because Bottas just really hasn't had the consistency to keep up with Hamilton.
No.
I mean, it's obviously hard because Hamilton is arguably the best driver ever to sit in an F1 car.
Yeah.
So to keep up the consistency with him is hard, but hopefully Bottas can do it because that car is insanely better than anyone else's. It's not even close. And on to the second, it's the second British Grand Prix, but it was called the 70th Anniversary Grand Prix. Kvyat got knocked out in Q1, interestingly, because his lap time got deleted due to exceeding track limits.
What does that mean?
He went too far across the white line. You've got to, of course, keep at least a tyre
God.
the other side of the white line. He got knocked out because of that.
That's a bullshit.
Verstappen and Red Bull did a really interesting strategy in Q2, which actually really paid off in the race. They actually qualified on hard tyres in Q2. I mean, usually people try a crazy medium tyre, but to go through on the hards is crazy. Hulkenberg obviously looked good and ended up getting P3 in qualifying. Vettel, this is how bad his car's been. He couldn't even get into Q3 on the soft tyres.
Oh no.
And everyone in Q2 was pretty much trying to qualify on mediums because obviously coming from that crazy end with the tyres exploding pretty much literally, they actually lowered they made the tyres softer.
Yeah.
Pirelli made the tyres softer, so teams were forced into a two-stop. So this is why everyone was trying to get onto the mediums, because the softs were just not good at all. They're good for about 1 or 2 laps, and that's about it. We saw through the race, 2 stops are actually a lot better than 1 stops.
Oh yeah.
It's so much better that we need softer tyres for every race. Bottas got on pole as both Mercedes went faster on mediums. Like we said, their car is absolutely crazy. McLaren have been brought back down to earth recently. They had the podium with Norris in the first race, and obviously they've been doing really well, but Sainz went out in Q2 and they're just not looking at the races. Excuse the pun, but is not looking at the races recently. Going on to the 70th Anniversary Grand Prix race itself, Vettel spun at the start. He got on the curb too much and just lost the back end and spun around, no fault of anyone else's.
It wasn't pretty.
I can't believe he didn't hit anyone that was coming behind him. It was absolutely crazy. Bottas just managed to stay ahead of Hamilton into the first corner and throughout the first lap. Albon actually pit really early on lap 7 to get out of traffic, and this is what we saw throughout the whole race. Verstappen was outpacing that insane Mercedes car because we have finally found that car's kryptonite.
Yeah.
We just need the track to be warm.
Apparently.
Because apparently Mercedes don't know how to keep their tyres on. Because we saw, even after the pit stops, both Mercedes pit for new tyres, and Verstappen was still out lapping them on old hards.
Yeah.
That Red Bull car was completely locked in. And even we saw it with Albon, he absolutely saved his race again. He had some insane pace too. Verstappen was quicker than Mercedes even after the pit stops. They were actually looking to do a 1-stop at one point, but crazily, Verstappen actually came in to cover off Bottas.
Yeah.
He only went 6 laps on the medium tyre, which was an absolutely crazy strategy, but it actually worked out really well. Hamilton went really long on some awful looking tyres. Mercedes tyres, after like 5 or 6 laps, they looked awful. They were blistered, there was lines down them, the tyres were just splitting. But I mean, Hamilton, when he was going long, I was literally just sitting there thinking, have Mercedes not learned anything from last week? Are they just waiting for Hamilton's tyre to explode again? Because apparently he can just win on 3 tyres anyway.
Who needs 4?
But I'm not sure if they were actually going for the 1-stop or whether they were just actually trying to go a bit longer so then they could go on the soft tyre at the end, which they actually did do.
Yeah.
He definitely wasn't going to win on the one stop though, and he did come in with 10 laps left to push for the podium.
I feel like it was a bit late though.
Yeah, I don't know if they were ever going to catch Verstappen because he had some insane pace.
Yeah.
But they pitted Hamilton. He came in and actually got back into second because he took a little bit to get past Leclerc. But
Yeah.
I think if he got past Leclerc a bit quicker, he could have tried at Verstappen. Because at the end of the race, he did start closing up to him, but there just wasn't enough laps, and then he ended up backing off to make sure the tyres actually got to the end, and he got past Bottas. You see how fast he got past Bottas?
Yeah.
Because Bottas had the terrible tyre wear. And, they're in the same car, and Hamilton went past him easily.
Yeah.
It was probably actually easier to get past Bottas than it was to get past Leclerc for him.
I would say so. It did take a while to get past Leclerc.
But yeah, Verstappen was in another world.
Yeah.
And, well, like I said, we need softer tyres every race because 2 stops are just so much more exciting and so much more interesting
Yeah, I fully agree with
than
that.
1 stops, and it's just not even close. So that's what we need for the sport, especially if Mercedes are going to be this far in front.
Yeah, everyone else needs to be really battling each other if Mercedes are going to walk with it like they do every year.
All I've got to say is thank God for Verstappen.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we would just have Mercedes after Mercedes after Mercedes. But thank God for Verstappen.
Yeah.
Because he makes everything interesting. We're going to move back onto Racing Point now. And they've been deducted 15 points and fined €400,000 after Renault's protests of their brake ducts, mainly on the rear brake ducts, they were found to be illegal. Yeah, the stewards upheld the protest, and they've been found to copying the Mercedes rear brake ducts and the front brake ducts, but it was mostly the rear brake ducts that they found that were illegal. I'm not sure what's going to happen to Mercedes because they're talking about maybe going to court for Mercedes for complying with Racing Point and actually helping them with that.
Really?
But Toto Wolff did come out and say, basically, go ahead, take us to court because we did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
So this may be going further though, because the teams, Renault and a few other teams they've not protested yet, but they have said that they have intent to protest, so they're going to have a look at it even more because I think they feel that 15 points and a €400,000 fine is not enough.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if this part is illegal, why are they still allowed to use it?
That's
and
exactly
taking
what I'm
15
thinking.
points off them isn't a lot.
No.
And €400,000, it sounds like a lot of money, but to these teams, it's
nothing.
absolutely nothing. That's pennies. So, yeah, I could see this going even further because I don't feel like the other teams think that's enough of a punishment.
I would agree with it.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like a lot considering what they've actually done.
Yeah.
And the FIA have actually said they're going to bring out new rules to make sure that this copying doesn't happen in the future.
I mean, you can't blame them for trying. I mean, if you look at Mercedes and you think, yeah, they're doing something right. Let's try and recreate it. But
I mean, Racing Point still stand by and say they've done nothing wrong.
I don't know how they can though at this point.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, that car's looking pretty good. They don't have big consistency, but who wouldn't want to copy a Mercedes car?
Exactly.
Because they're absolutely, completely ahead of the rest of them. Now we're going to go on to the balls it up section.
Yeah.
We're going to put Man United in this balls it up section for a couple of reasons. First, their approach to the Jadon Sancho transfer. I mean, they've got absolutely destroyed by Borussia Dortmund here because they came out and said, oh, we're standing firm, we're not going to go above this price to buy him. Well, Dortmund have obviously gone and done the simple thing of saying, well, if you're not going to pay for him, you're not going to get him. And it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense what Man United were doing. It's like, oh, we're not going to pay over this amount, or if you're not going to pay over that amount, you ain't going to get him.
No.
And I just don't understand. If you really want him that bad,
you'd pay a bit more.
Why are they even going for him if they know they can't afford him?
Yeah.
So, because obviously everything with COVID, teams have obviously lost money.
Yeah.
But I just don't understand the approach there. It's like they're trying to take the higher ground and they're just sinking in quicksand.
Yep, that was the perfect way to describe it.
Also, Man United, their game in the Europa League against Copenhagen, not only can they not defend, but they apparently can't score unless they get penalties, which again, who's shocked that Man United get a penalty? They had the most penalties of any team in the Premier League this season and for ages. Yeah, it took an extra time penalty for them to beat Copenhagen. No offence to Copenhagen, but they're not exactly the greatest team in Europe, and Man United should easily be beating them. But yeah, I can't believe it took them extra time and a penalty to beat them.
Yeah,
that's absolutely crazy.
The defending was
and
horrific.
if that's all Man United can offer, I don't think any of the other big teams in the Europa League have to worry.
No.
And we have a balls up moment in snooker between Kyron Wilson and Judd Trump in the 12th frame of their quarter-final matchup. It was dubbed the frame that nobody wanted to win, and I can see why when I watched it, because both players were making simple errors, like simple pots that you expect these kind of players to make, and they were just missing them.
Yeah.
Like both of them, time and time again. They both had chances to win the frame, and they were both missing simple pots. I mean, Wilson finally edged it out on the black ball. It went to the final ball, but I mean, it was just funny that Judd Trump actually got the double kiss on the black ball to put it right in front of the pocket, and then Kyron Wilson finally managed to pot the winning ball. It was just an absolute mess, and it belongs right in the balls up section, because that is exactly balls up. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it.
It's that bad.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch, definitely. I mean, I'm not saying that I could, but I think I could have probably made them shots.
Yeah.
There was one on the pink ball for Kyron Wilson, I believe it was, like dead straight to the pot, dead straight to the corner pocket, and he just hits the side of the pocket and it just bounces out.
Wow.
The balls up section has to include Racing Point for copying Mercedes' car and getting found out about it.
Of course.
We've also got to mention Vettel and Ferrari.
Yeah.
Because that car is just not looking any good right now. Vettel is still spinning, which we've got to talk about. He still loves to spin after last year. He still hasn't learned. He still hasn't got it out of his head that you're actually meant to keep your car in a straight line. And that Ferrari, I mean, look at Leclerc.
Yeah.
He's pulling that car up. Vettel's got no pace. He can't even make it through to Q3.
Yeah, like we get that the car isn't great, but if Leclerc is getting up to fourth, then
I'm not sure it's Vettel's fault, because he obviously hasn't forgotten how to drive. But they just haven't got that set up right, and that car's just absolutely undrivable.
Apparently.
Clearly, because I mean, Vettel was struggling to overtake Grosjean in a Haas.
Yeah. And this is better.
During the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, and obviously the last balls up section moment, we've got to put Mercedes tyre wear issues, because they have that car to not win with a car that's a second faster than anyone else in qualifying and that much better on the grid, to not be able to get your tyres right.
It's a big balls
to have
up.
that little pace and that little tyre wear. I mean, on the hardest compound of tyres, they could barely go 10 laps without the tyres looking a mess. They've really got to sort that out, because I assume in the next Grand Prix in Spain, it's going to be the exact same. Because it's going to be hot out there and the track's going to be hot, so they're going to have to get that sorted out really quickly, because obviously they've only got a week to think about that.
They can't afford to keep having these tyre issues.
Yeah, they can't get complacent. They've got to keep improving their car, clearly, because to have a car that much faster on the grid than any other team, and to just not be able to keep your tyres in order, that is definitely a massive balls up on Mercedes' part. And with that, we've come to the end of this episode of the Balls Up podcast. Thank you for listening.
You can check out our previous episodes on YouTube, Mixcloud or Spotify. And if you've not already, follow us on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube.